Welcome to the Director's Cut podcast, a part of Storytown Radio Show. In this podcast, we will feature stories that didn't make the final cut for the live radio show, but they're excellent stories and need to be shared. This haunting story was considered for the Haints, Hollers, and Halloween episode. Jonesborough is full of ghost stories, and Sue Henley shares some of her own in this spooky interview with Jules Corriere and Sky McFarland.
Let's just start at the beginning.
Great.
Before we first bought this house in Jonesborough, it's at 127 East Main Street, and Miss Martha Baxter had lived there since she was 2 years old, and she was then 90. And I asked Miss Martha, I said, Miss Martha, are there any ghosts in this house? She looked at me kind of strange, and she said, well, they've never bothered me. But they started bothering us before we ever moved into the house. They would move paint buckets. They would hide paint brushes. I'd turn the radio off when I left. The radio would be blaring when I came back. This went on the whole time that we were renovating the house. The very first night we moved into the house, first night we ever spent there was two bedrooms upstairs. And one of the bedrooms had a lock on the outside of the bedroom door. And I thought, well, that's really weird. Well, we get up the next morning, or my husband gets up early, and he tries to get out of the bedroom, and the door was locked. Could not get out. It'd been locked from the outside. And we had just painted that room, and there was a screwdriver there, and we worked and worked and worked, beat the paint all to heck, and finally got out of that room. And the next night, I heard this commotion outside the bedroom window, and I thought, what in the world? It was my Gerald. He was putting up a ladder on the side of the house where the bedroom was in order we got locked into the bedroom again. But we took the lock off the outside of the door. First night I was ever there alone, Gerald had gone to take his aunt and uncle that were visiting out to eat, and his mom and dad, and there wasn't enough room in the car, so I stayed at home. We'd been painting, and there was a huge, big wooden stepladder that was sitting out in the foyer. And about 9 o'clock, I heard that stepladder. It made a big noise when you moved, and he moved it across the floor. And I went out there and looked, and I thought, well, Gerald's come home, and he hadn't even said hello. Well, there was nobody there. So I just went back in and shut the door like that was going to help. And finally, Gerald comes home, and the ladder had literally, that huge, big 10-foot wooden step ladder had been moved right across the floor. And it was just, they'd never done anything really to do damage to the house. But I remember coming home, Gerald and I would be out to eat, and my friend from the ice cream parlor used to come spend the night with us when it was going to snow, because she didn't want to drive to Irwin. And I came home one night, and there was rose petals scattered all the way up the staircase. I came home one night, there was a rose, not a live rose, but a dried rose that I had lots of dried arrangements, lying across from where I always sat. Came home from work one afternoon, and I have shelves in my kitchen up over the doors. And there are antiques sitting all the way up there. There's crocks and old pots and all this stuff. And I came home, and there was 4 pieces sitting down in the floor. It was not broken. They were just sitting there in the floor. Washing dishes one night, there was an antique saw. I have open shelves over my sink. There was an antique toothpick holder that just went flying off and went over on the hearth and broke all to pieces. The only destructive thing that's really ever happened in the house was this went on for years, and someone said one time, "Are you not afraid?" I said, "No." But one of the strangest things that happened, it was during one Halloween, and the TV people had been there, and they were interviewing me about the ghost in the house. And I said, they asked me, "Are you ever afraid in the house?" And I said, no, it was her house before it was my house. So, no, I'm not afraid. So anyway, I got a phone call, or Gerald got a phone call. He was up at the shop. And it was this little lady from Abington, Virginia. She was originally from Long Island, New York, and she called, and she called me, and she said that I just wanted to tell you how much I appreciated what you said on television about the ghost in your house, that it was her house before, and you respected her. And I thought that was, kind of strange. But anyway, I just said, if you're ever in Jonesborough, just come by. Well, about a week later, Gerald was at the shop, and this little lady came by, and Gerald called me, and she came down to the house, and that was the strangest little lady. She was beautiful. She was dressed beautifully. She was in her 80s, and there was a driver that was with her. And she said that her husband was a famous psychic in Long Island, and she said they had seances every Monday night. And she said her neighbors never knew the whole time that she lived there that they were having seances. They thought, I don't know what they thought, but anyway. And she said, I'm here to tell you that if you ever do anything bad in this house, like bring drugs in or anything that will be detrimental to this house, you will be out before the sun sets. Okay. And that was strange. And she had the strangest yellowish green eyes, and it felt like she was looking into your soul when she looked at you. I never heard her, and she had left me a phone number, and my friend got real curious, and she says, okay, we're going to go visit this little lady. We called, and there was nobody ever answered the phone. I don't know, but it was the strangest experience. But the only really destructive thing that's ever happened in the house, it was before Christmas one year, and I had a white Madonna sitting in the window just as you go up my stair steps. There's a window right there, halfway up. And I had that Madonna sitting there all year long, and I took it up and put it in, we call it the ghost bedroom upstairs. And there was a large globe, a huge, large globe that sat down over the Madonna. The Madonna sat in the middle of a wreath, and the wreath had 4 candles in it. It was like an Advent wreath, and the candles were real wiggly on the outside of the globe. We went in there about 3 o'clock the next afternoon. That Madonna had been carefully lifted out of that globe, thrown over into the floor, and broke into a jillion pieces. The candles were still totally intact around the globe. I think that's when my husband actually began to believe that there was a spirit in the house. And my friend Trish, that owned the ice cream parlor, as I said, she would come over and spend the night with me when it was going to snow, and we would watch movies and all this. Well, she gets up one morning, and she comes downstairs, and she says, oh, my God. She says, Sue, something awful happened to me last night. Said, I was lying in bed on my back, and said, all of a sudden there was this pressure on my back, and I couldn't move. And she said, I tried to scream, and I couldn't scream. But she said it wasn't a terrifying thing. It was a peaceful thing. And she said, I just went to sleep. Well, my niece, who was about 13, 14 at that time, would come to see me. And when she was younger than that, we had to put a cot in our room. She was terrified. She wouldn't sleep in any place else in the house. So anyway, Bobby got really brave, and she had a little friend there one night. And she got up the next morning. She says, oh, Aunt Sue, I tried to scream for you last night, and I couldn't get a word out of my mouth. There was something laid on top of me. But she said it only lasted a few seconds, and said I just felt this peaceful calm, and I went to sleep.
Thank you for tuning in to the Director's Cut podcast, a part of Storytown Radio Show. Check in next month for more stories. Storytown is supported by the Tennessee Arts Commission, Trivia with Buds, Terry and Sandee Countermine, Gary and Sandee Degner, McLeod Organics, the Wild Women of Jonesborough, and Wolfe Development.